Welcome to the 688 Sub Brief. Man, I'm excited about this one. This was the submarine that I spent most of my career on, and I'm happy that I can finally talk about it. They made a total of 62 of the 688 class, flights 1, 2, and 3 between 1971 and 1996. They're built by two shipyards, Newport News Shipbuilding and General Dynamics Electric Boat. That is actually broken up into two parts, EB is. You have the assembly building there in New London, but you also have the reactor side and engine room side assembly up in Rhode Island. So that submarine is made at two different locations and then assembled at off the river, the Thames River, there in New London, Connecticut. So 34 boats were decommissioned as of the time of this recording. 26 boats continue to be in service, and they did convert two into training vessels down in South Carolina. And what they are is they're permanently moored, as in welded literally, to the pier. And the engine rooms still function. Like the reactors can go critical, the screw can turn, and they actually maintain the engine room as students. And it's part of the Navy's nuclear training program down there. It's very good. It's a very difficult school, both physically and mentally. But those that graduate that become the best nuclear engineers, I believe, in the world. So the 688, 718 Flight 1, these are the hull numbers. Up to 718 is Flight 1, 719 to 750 is Flight 2, and 751 all the way to 773, the very last one, was Flight 3. Flight 2 boats are dedicated vertical launch tube, 12 dedicated vertical launch tubes. So what that is Flight 1, we just had 4 torpedo tubes. Now we could still launch the Tomahawks and the Harpoons out of those torpedo tubes horizontally. They just would be in a canister that was buoyant and it would float up to the surface and then eject the missile once it got to the surface there. But with Flight 2 and Flight 3, they added the 12 VLS tubes right behind the sonar dome in front of the submarine. So they're kind of wedged in there. And some interesting, and we'll get into all this, but the interesting thing about the Flight 2 is that they started out as Flight 1, and then in the design process, and later on, and in some cases, they actually had started building the submarine as a Flight 1 and converted it to a Flight 2, which caused all sorts of problems with the ballast control system. Center of buoyancy, center of gravity was all miscalculated, and they had to compensate for all that. So there are some boats, and this is like just extra credit here for you guys who are really into this. The first couple Flight 2 boats began their life as Flight 1, and as they were being constructed, they had to go in and add ballast, literally lead weights, to the bottom of the boat to recenter the center of gravity and buoyancy into an area where the submarine would be more stable. And there's a lot of other engineering reasons for them doing that, but that's the basic, reason for that. It was quite a mess, because I remember one of my tours was on a Flight 2 boat after all that had been done, and the crew still talked about it, even though it happened like 10 years ago. The crew had completely recycled 2 or 3 times, and the story of them trying to correct the ballast and buoyancy of the Flight 2s was, I'll say, legendary, because it lasted for over 10 years of just word of mouth. And of course, the story probably got spun out of control and exaggerated, but it seemed like it was a real problem in the beginning. Anyway, so that's a little bit about Flight 2 boats. Now, Flight 3 have the most extensive modernization defined, and that's what makes them the 688I. I stands for improved. And what they mean by that is a lot of stealth updates have been installed on that, as well as software and hardware updates. Like the combat system is incredible. It's it's basically the same one on the Virginia, but Virginia has its own version of it. And just know that it's really, really good. Okay. And so they gradually are phasing these out of service. Sadly, this is my old stomping ground. I really miss these boats. They're so good. Like, this is the workhorse of the U.S. Navy as far as the submarines go, the 688 class. And slowly but surely, the Virginias are taking over that role. But even today, we still have 26 of these prowling the oceans out there somewhere. We're waiting for maintenance. That could be the other thing. Okay, we won't go into that. Flight 1, let's go. 31 boats constructed. They're all retired now. They're gone. Those are the ones that I served on originally. The Flight 2 boats, I was on the Pittsburgh, and I believe they just decommissioned her. So I think all the ones that I was on are gone now. 8 boats constructed, 5 retired, 3 are in active service now. Amazingly, the Flight 2, I can't believe they didn't decommission the Flight 2 when they decommissioned the Flight 1 for all the issues it had. And then finally, there's 23 boats still in active service for the for the Flight 3. Here we go. Let's talking about weapons. Then we're going to get into the systems here. So we shoot the Tomahawk, the Block 3. There's all sorts of versions of the Tomahawk, but you can shoot the Tomahawk Block 3 or Block 4. Block 4, I believe, is the VLS mod for Flight 1 and 2. So launch from the Block 4 was the launch from the torpedo tubes. That's the one that had the canister, but the rest of the missiles pretty much the same. The Harpoon Block 2 Plus anti-ship missile can be fired from the torpedo tubes. This is something I'm not going to say anything more about the Harpoon. Just know that we can shoot it from the torpedo tubes. Like I said, we had 4 53-centimeter torpedo tubes, 12 VLS on Flight 2 and Flight 3. The Mark 48, Mod 5 and 6, and that Mod 7 AT, holy cow. You will not get away from a Mark 48 Mod 7 torpedo. I don't care what kind of defense system you have. Unless you physically destroy the incoming torpedo, which are systems that do this now, there's no way you're getting away from that thing. It is a beast once it hones in on you. These torpedoes now can classify the target. They know exactly what they're hitting, whether it's a Shang class or a Trafalgar class in training. Whenever you shoot these things on the range and you recover the weapon, because obviously you want to reuse it, they can go into the data and see what the torpedo was thinking as it outmaneuvered the countermeasures and struck the target. And one of the things it does is it knows the classification of the target it's killing it. It's so advanced. It's insane. We should probably do a lecture on just these weapons if I can get the information. Okay, Mark 67 torpedo launch mobile mines. These things were a pain in the butt as a crewman, but they're very capable. You can put 2 Mark 67s in the same rack that takes 1 Mark 48, essentially doubling your weapons load, but then you have mines and not torpedoes. You're not going to be shooting a mine at a fleet that's coming at you. You're going to shoot a mine at a harbor that has a fleet in it. That's kind of the big difference there. But just know that it takes up half the space, so you can have 2 Mark 67s for every 1 Mark 48 if you wanted to. All right, sensors. The BLQ-10 ESM up there on the top mast. We have multiple masts and antennas. Just know the BLQ-10 is one of them. The Beeps 15H radar, that's just surface search radar. It is a class identifier, so as soon as we fire that thing off, they're like, oh, 688 over there. So we never, ever use it. We always use a Furuno that we bought off the shelf, so we look like a trawler. BQQ-10 active sonar passive, that's the large bow array. We went from having a spherical array to a large bow array that the Virginia ended up using. I believe all the 688s still use the spherical array. I'm not aware of any that got the large bow array modification. Okay, the BYG-1 fire control system, we called it the busy one. Very capable in that it incorporated everything from the radio room, literally radio messages, to the sonar room. And in the middle was fire control and the captain and the con and all the officers. And so everybody's talking to everybody now, and it's all summed up for the officers in control. Very good system. Very reliable too. Let's talk about towed arrays coming out the rear end. So you have a towed array that comes out on the port side. The towed array comes out on the starboard side. And so the one that comes out on the port side is the TB16 or TB34 fat line array. This thing is about 2.5 inches to 3 inches fat. And we store it along the length of the submarine on an outside storage tube. And it is a very easy array to deploy quickly and quietly. And if you find yourself in a situation where, for whatever reason, you didn't have the towed array out, you've already messed up at that point, but you need to get it out quickly, you can deploy this TB16 fast and just all of a sudden your sonar ranges go from what you have in your environment to ×5 range. That's how good this is, right? And then you can deploy the TB23, TB29 if you want to see all the way across the freaking ocean, because this thing will pick up everything like earthquakes in Indonesia when you're off the coast of the United States. And an earthquake is kind of an unfair example because it's very low frequency, right? But my point is, there really is no limit to this range. It's all about what are the conditions of the ocean, of course, and then what is the source. And if it's a low frequency rumble like an earthquake, well, guess what, folks? Guess who's hearing that? This thing might as well be a seismometer that they have around the globe for measuring nuclear detonations and earthquakes, because that's about how sensitive it is. And we've got, 49 of these submarines prowling the ocean, towing these things around. So we have a really good idea of where everyone's at most of the time. TB29, everybody. Okay, let's talk about Furuno radar right there. You see a little red circle around it? Yeah. That's so that whenever we are on the surface, we don't run into things. So we use the same civilian radar that everybody else uses. And it also keeps us from having to use the Beeps 15. All right, let's talk about periscopes. Type 18 search periscope. There's all sorts of different variants and mods and changes they make to these scopes all the time. Just know that it's a Type 18. The same can be said with the Type 8 attack periscope. I don't know if two periscopes are ever exactly the same, even though they're all Type 8, because like I said, they're always modifying these darn things. And the snorkel mask, see how the snorkel mask raises up there? That's the goes in. That's where all the air for the submarine is sucked in. Whether you're running your diesel or not, if you want air in your submarine, you raise this thing, the snorkel. That's how you do it. Okay, let's talk about the Beeps 15 radar there on the right. It is raised in its locked position. And so that's how you would raise it up and down and lower it. And then if you wanted to, you could rotate and radiate. And I've got a really good story for this one right here. You see the gentleman that's actually standing on top of the sail. So on the boat that I was on, and I was in sonar, so I didn't see any of this, but they said to raise the Beeps 15, prepare to rotate and radiate Beeps 15, and they did all that. And that's all done from down at the Chief of the Watch station in control. They're manipulating the little levers down there, little switches actually. Anyway, so they raise it, get ready to rotate and radiate, which is controlled by the radar itself. Radar operator is behind the Chief of the Watch there in the control room, a few feet away. It's not right behind him. Anyway, they start rotating and radiating, and they're like from the bridge, like, stop rotating and radiating, secure the radar. We're like, what the hell happened? We just started this, right? And so we thought, well, maybe they're going to go to the Furuno or something, right? No, the phone talker had his cord wrapped around the mast of the Beeps 15. So whenever it started rotating, it started coiling up his phone talker cord, and that phone talker cord is lashed to a little speaking device that's on his neck, and it was choking him or about to choke him. They stopped it, thank God, before it broke his neck. We were like, what are you doing there? So just be aware that it's a little sketchy up there in the bridge. It's not, everyone is in calm seas is invited up to the bridge if they want to go. They can have one man at a time, and they usually can stay as long as they want, as long as they don't get in the way of anything, just so you can have what's called a look around. Now, clearly this phone talker wasn't doing a look around, but just know that it's not safe in the bridge. It never is, But anyways, that's what happened to a phone talker. Scared the hell out of everybody, but thankfully he was okay. Okay, cutaway of the submarine here. This is actually a pretty good cutaway. They got the levels right, and they got a lot of the machinery right too. Because I've cleaned this thing stem to stern, everything but the nuclear reactor compartment. Nobody ever goes in there for obvious reasons. But they did a good job. This is a good drawing here. Look how long the torpedo tubes are. Take a look at that. It is a long piece of metal, like more than twice the length of a torpedo. And the torpedo itself is already really long. And the reason for that is that it has to go through, a couple ballast tanks to make it towards the front. And I want to point out, in American submarines and most of our NATO submarines, actually, the torpedo tubes don't go out directly around the front, because that's where the sonar sphere is, or the large bow array. They're canted at an angle, a very shallow angle, but an angle nonetheless. So they kind of come out the side a little bit around ballast tank 2. And in this case, you can see it's right where they put the VLS, which would be ballast tank 1 and 2 there. So really good picture. So you see all the systems going back. Obviously, there's 3 hatches here. So a weapons loading hatch is often it is also the most convenient way to get into the submarine, because you only go down one flight of stairs, and there's no escape trunk or anything. The other 2 hatches back there, you go into what's called an escape trunk first, and then you have to crawl from the escape trunk down into the athwartship's passageway, and then finally the hatch over the engine room obviously is for easy access into the engine room, but it's a 2-level climb. If you only want to go down about 5 steps, you use the weapon shipping hatch. And the brow is often that connects the pier to the boat right there where the weapon shipping hatch is. So that's why they use that the most. Also, the CO and XO's stateroom is right there by the weapon shipping hatch, as is the sonar room. It was very convenient for us. I can't tell you how many times I went to work and I either went to the sonar right away. Obviously, we'd go to the galley for lunch, and then it was like doing maintenance somewhere in the forward compartment. I wouldn't even go in the engine room normally, even in port at sea, it didn't matter. A lot of times they don't have the hatch to the engine room even open because you don't want anyone walking over the top of a nuclear compartment. Even when it's shut down, it's still considered a high radiation area. So you don't want to be walking past the middle hatch, which we called that was the athwartship's passageway. Forward escape trunk is what we called it. Yeah. Good photo. Good cutaway. All right. So here's where those shipyards are, ladies and gentlemen. That's right. We do not build submarines on the West Coast. We should. We need to fix that. But this is where they're built now. General Dynamics Electric Boat is there in Connecticut. Again, they make part of it. They initiate the build in Rhode Island, and then they ship it down to EB. And then Newport News is down there in Newport, Virginia. You got great little photos of them there on the right. All right, Los Angeles class by the numbers. It is a 1 GE power S6G nuclear reactor. And we'll talk a little bit about that, very little actually. 2 turbines, produces 35,000 horsepower that is coupled to 1 shaft, which means you've got 2 of those engines, main engines essentially, that turn 1 shaft, and then it combines that power to 1 screw. And it goes very fast for the time. Remember, this built in the 1970s here, folks. You know, we're screaming through the ocean trying to catch up to that alpha. All right, 7,800 tons is the weight displacement when she's submerged. She's 360 feet long. This is a very easy number to remember. 360, like a full circle, 360. 33 feet wide and drafts. Well, you can change the draft to be whatever you want it to be, but we'll say 32 feet. That sounds about right. You can change the buoyancy of this thing in port at sea. Obviously, it's a submarine. 33 knots max speed is the public number. Know that she has 4 bow tubes and 12 VLS for flights 2 and 3. Raytheon UGM 109 Tomahawks Block 3 rather, and UGM Block 4 are what's shot. And then we shoot the UGM 84M, which is the Harpoon Block 2 Plus submarine variant of the Harpoon missile. Raytheon makes our mods for our Mark 48 and that Seabass mod. Man, I'm telling you what, you're not getting away from it. I don't want to beat that drum to death, but boy, it's a really good build. It's scary build. Mark 67 submarine launched mobile mine, like I talked about, takes up half the space of a torpedo. So expect to have some of those. Well, here's the way mines work. If you're going to go mine a harbor, you're going to mine the shit out of it. So you're going to take a lot of mines. But you know, it's rare that you run around with just like 2 mines in your torpedo room. What are you going to do with that? Okay, BPS 15, that's the surface search radar that we never use. The BQL 10 is ESM, and the QQ 10, also known as ARCI, sonar system. Lockheed Martin, IBM. There's a lot of companies that are involved in making this, but I guess Lockheed Martin is the primary vendor for that. The TB-23 thin line fat lines we talked about already. The BQS 15 is the active close-in ranging ice detector. We haven't talked about this yet. This is a very high frequency, but unfortunately very short range, high resolution sonar system. And we use it a lot under ice to keep from hitting the ice. But it also looks up and looks down. It can be used as a fathometer if you want. Pretty reliable system. This thing, it's still in service today. It's just given generational upgrades, but the foundation of it is very solid, so they still keep it around. Obviously, the Busy 1 or BYG-1 fire control system. And we do have both internal and external anti-torpedo decoys. I don't know how much I can go into that. Just know that the external tubes are loaded in port, whereas the internal one we can reload underway at sea. So we can choose as many of those as we want, as we have anyway. Okay, Flight 2 improvements. They went from a D1G2 to a D2W reactor core. That's all sensitive information. Just know that they improved the reactor core. And it can shoot 12 vertical launch missiles. There they are with the hatches open. We used to paint those like pool balls, but they put a kibosh to that because the Navy said you're not allowed to have fun anymore. So what used to be tube 8 would look like a little 8 ball, and tube 10 would look like a 10 ball. But those days are over. All right, so here's the SG6 nuclear reactor. I cannot describe the picture you're seeing. You have to figure that out for yourself. And I'll have to read this slide verbatim. It's manufactured by General Electric, provides electricity generation and propulsion. Generates 26 megawatts. S6G stands for submarine, 6th generation General Electric design. Consists of the reactor coolant, steam generation, and other support systems. Propels the Los Angeles class submarine over 15 knots when surfaced and 25 knots when submerged. All right, Beeps 15 radar. This is our primary surface search radar and used to choke phone talkers up top side on its spare time. It is an X-band, NATO IJ band 2D surface search radar. Has the COTS automatic radar plotting, which does not work at all, but hopefully it's better now than it used to be, but it used to be terrible. You couldn't rely on it. 8 to 12 gigahertz is the frequency range. It costs just under $1 million a copy, which is ridiculous for what it does. But that probably includes the install, I would hope. All right, hear this thing, the BLQ-10 ZSM. This is the whole reason why we go spying, boys. Whenever we're off the coast of a country that doesn't know we're there, we're raising our masted antennas. This is the device that's collecting the information. Okay, this is the heart of espionage for the submarine force. The BLQ-10 ESM, among other arrays, by the way, but this is the system that collects the data. It breaks the encryption if it needs to. It's a one-stop shop for everything spying. All right, it's manufactured by Lockheed Martin. Automatic detection, acquisition, identification, localization. All that stuff has been done by AI for years. That is not new when it comes to this stuff. It was done when I was in. So consists of signal receivers and displays and advanced processing and analysis equipment. The guys that work in this room when we're on mission only come out to eat and sleep, literally, and then you never ever see them again. They have no free time. They live in this is in the radio room, by the way. So the radio guys are doing their little radio thing and trying to stay out of the way of these guys. And these guys are called spooks. That's their nickname. Spooky spooks. So it's a passive situational awareness electronic environment analysis platform. If you notice, it looks like some equipment is missing, isn't it? Well, whenever the spooks come down for a mission, they bring the rest of those drawers with them. And whenever they leave, they take it with them. So it's a bunch of things, including storage, crypto, you name it, is what goes in there. So if you're looking at, hey, cabinet number 5, there's missing a drawer. Yeah, it's supposed to be. Yeah, that's the way it is. Unless you're on mission, then those drawers are full and you know you're doing something special. All right, let's get off that. ARCI, the other piece of gear that collects very important data, and this is the part that I was involved with heavily my entire career, BQQ-10 sonar suite. It's called ARCI, which is like the upgraded version of the BQQ-10. And this system was in development. Well, it's always in development. It doesn't stop being in development. But to get to BQQ-10, we were running systems in 1991 and 92 that grew and got better over the 1990s into what you see on your screen now. And I had the privilege of being a part of that team. Many sonarmen were a part of the team. It wasn't that unique. It was just, it was good to be involved in making this system to what it became. It is a very capable sonar system that can detect everything from not just submarines, surface ships, earthquakes, meteors, unidentified submerged objects, and then send that off to the Pentagon for analysis. All that stuff was done in high definition color on your screens. You could look out onto these screens and get an idea of what's going on around you. And if we were at periscope depth and they had the scopes raised, well, we could see what the scope operator was seeing too, because there's a little camera in the periscope now. And you can see that on one of the consoles there. It's got the paravis. It's very good. All right, so this consists of a spherical array or a large bow aperture array, a Hall array, which was almost useless, but we did kind of integrate it with our other stuff. Okay, wide aperture array, conformal array. Oh, first of all, wide aperture array was game changing. That thing is so sensitive. It can hear any level of energy that comes by the boat. We can set up the wide aperture array to detect it if we want to. So you got to be careful with that, because then you can get, if you get detections all the time, then no one detection is special, right? So you got to configure in a way that doesn't just become useless. Anyway, so we also have conformal arrays, high frequency arrays, and towed arrays. And the beauty of this system is it can take like the towed array and the wide aperture array and the Hall array and combine it digitally inside the memory of the computer into one array that's enormously long and very sensitive. And whenever it comes to sonar arrays, physical size does matter, okay, as well as shape and everything else. So once that began happening, holy smokes, we were off to the races when it comes to intel collection. Because not only did we have this array that could see halfway across the freaking ocean, we could actually use the information now. It was two great abilities coming together. TB29, BQQ10, and very, very good system. Okay, the BYG1 or Busy One takes all this information. It connects radio and the spooks in there and the sonar, the weirdos in there, and brings it into control for the fire control operators to combine into some usable information. So this is built by General Dynamics Mission Systems, integrated weapon control system, because it does also shoot the torpedo tubes down there. It's great for situational awareness because we're bringing all of our sensor data together into one stop. So at one glance, the captain can look at that screen and say, all right, we've got 5 contacts. 3 are on the left drawing left, 1's on the right drawing left, and we have 1 on the left drawing right. We're not in a good position. It is time to maneuver the submarine. I did that in 5 seconds just by looking at that screen. That's what this system does, because you can see that there, you're safe right now, but in a few minutes or maybe an hour, depending on the scenario here, you're not going to be safe anymore. It's time to move. And so that's what this does. It's such a good system. So just know that the fire control system is more of a command and weapon control system now that brings all this information together for the use of the officers to fight the ship. All right. Thin line towed array, commercial off-the-shelf technology version. Yeah, a lot of commercial parts. I'm talking Radio Shack were put together in a way to build this array, and it worked. It is a lightweight tow cable that somehow doesn't snap, and that took years to figure out how to build the tow cable. There's more technology, I think, in the tow cable than in the actual array itself, because the thing that makes the array special is its length. It's so long. The problem with pulling a long array through any kind of medium like liquid is that's a lot of drag. How in the world are you going to build a cable that can drag tens of thousands of tons, consistently, reliably for day after day, year after year? So they finally figured that out, and then they made it lightweight, which was great for maneuverability and a lot of other things too. Max range, it says here, about 185 kilometers, passive only. That's true. Generations, in the 2000s it came around. We had TB29 in the 90s, but it was very developmental. I remember whenever the entire Navy had like 2, and we were getting one of them, and we were like, what? They're entrusting this TB29 to us? But we took good care of it, yeah. We didn't lose it anyway, like the other knuckleheads did. All right, Tomahawk, TLM, this is the land attack missile. There is a ship attack missile version of this, but whenever I was in the Navy, it wasn't around. They're thinking about bringing it back. It's basically, it's a subsonic, very accurate, long range, over 900 nautical miles, land attack missile. Uses high explosive PBXN or nuclear, can carry a 150 kiloton nuclear warhead if it wanted to. But almost all of them are just the 450 kilograms, which are still a pretty big bang of high explosive PBXN. Subsonic at 0.7 Mach. It uses all sorts of terrain, avoidance and following technologies like TERCOM, DISMAC, internal, of course, navigation, and GPS. So the GPS knows where it's at. The INS knows where it's at. The TERCOM is really interesting because it actually looks outside the missile with sensors and can see the ground with like mountain ranges and hills and objects that are landmarks, essentially. And it is always verifying its position by geolocating itself, is the new word for it, is what we use online. This missile geolocates itself all the way to target on top of GPS INS, and it just makes sure that all those systems agree that it is where it says it is. And so it ILC to 1995. That's not, well, we did use this in the first Gulf War, 1991. Just know that. USS Pittsburgh fired a number of these missiles into Baghdad. But I believe maybe the official Block 3 was probably 1995. Yeah. And then Block 4, 2003. All right. Here's the Harpoon. This thing is the old warhorse of the U.S. Navy. It's been upgraded over and over again over the years, but it's basically a long range now. There's 2 modes. There's a short range or a medium range rather, and a long range version of this anti-ship missile. Goes to ships, blows it up, high explosive warhead. Designed to set the ship on fire. It's kind of evil that way. The warhead is designed to shred the insulation that's on the outside or the inside of the hull where the crew is and set that stuff on fire so it burns. And so the crew spends more time putting the fire out than fighting the ship. So that's the idea there. And it has a lot of the same internal sensors, GPS, INS, Link 11 compatible, which means that it can be communicated with in flight by P3s, P8s. Anybody with an Aegis system can communicate with this missile and tell it to do different things. Uses 4th generation seeker features, which means that it can look at a target and get an idea of, make sure it's not a trawler that it's hitting, make sure, look for the big ship if its mission is to hit the carrier. Uses JP-10 fuel, which is turbojet engine fuel, 226 kilogram warhead. So what is that, about half of the Tomahawk? 0.8 Mach and long range, 67 nautical miles is the medium range one. There is one that is over 100 miles, a variant of this now. Okay. And IOC in 2020 was the most recent upgrade. Like I said, it's been around for years. All right, Mark 48 torpedo. I've already sung the praises of this, so we'll just go over some of the specs here. Look at the size of this thing. It is, 5.8 meters long and weighs in the vicinity of almost 1,700 kilograms, which is really freaking heavy. It's got, the max public speed is 55 knots. We'll just go with that. The range is 50 kilometers for the Mod 7, and the depth can go in excess of 1,200 feet. This thing can go down and get the deep diving submarines now. The Russians haven't had that advantage in a very long time, but we've just made sure that the new torpedoes that we build can go deeper and deeper, because you never really know how deep those titanium-hulled submarines are going to go. They're going to try and get below our weapons if they can. And so we make sure that that's just not possible with this thing. All right, so the guidance is autonomous and wire guided, so it can be updated by an operator as long as we have that wired connection. When I was in, we used copper wire. I'm told they use fiber optic now. The good thing about that is you get a lot more information, a lot higher bandwidth. So you can do reattack. It does have automatic reattack. If it realizes it missed the target, it'll go back and try and find it until it runs out of fuel. And it's very good at doing that, by the way. I can't tell you how many times in war games we dodged the shot and the damn reattack got us. And we were like, oh, ouch. Didn't dodge the second one. Same weapon, second pass. Seabass is active and or passive homing. I can't talk about Seabass other than tell you that you don't want it coming after you. All right, let's talk about the mobile mines. So the mobile mines come in all sorts of different flavors. They're mobile in that you shoot them out of the torpedo tube and then they swim under their own power. You can see the little tiny propeller there to the bottom to make sure it doesn't just break apart on the bottom. And so it does swim a short distance. Some of the new ones can, after it detects a contact, swim in the direction of the contact to get a little bit closer before detonating, but most of them are just bottom detonated. They have a huge warhead, like 150 kilograms in shallow water will launch your happy ship into the air. So don't think that just because this warhead is less than a regular torpedo, because of the environment it's in, usually shallow water, like a harbor or a transiting point, a Q route is what it's normally called, going in and out of a harbor. You put this in that, and it's gonna focus that energy. So the way these things detect is very clever. It's magnetic, like a torpedo. It could be seismic as well. So let's say you set it outside a harbor and you say, only listen for ships that exceed this noise threshold. So you're not counting every small trawler that comes by, but you want like large ships coming out of the harbor. And so the tug goes by as they're deploying a fleet. The frigates go by and it's got some sailboats wishing them well. None of those become targets, but as soon as that big boat comes in and is just shaking the ground because those engines are so large and it's so shallow, that's what will trigger this thing seismically, and it will either explode immediately or it will swim a little bit closer to it and explode under it. So very cool stuff. All right, final thoughts, man. I wish I had more to this lecture. I could talk about this submarine all day. And so if you guys have any questions, just shoot them out in the Patreon comments. So the Los Angeles class were the backbone of the submarine fleet. Absolutely. They are being retired and replaced by the Virginias, and the Virginias are really good too. I'm really excited about the Virginia. I hate to see my old submarines go, but that's the way life is. You know, the new generation replaces the old generation, and that's what's happening right now. But man, the Virginia class, if we can get enough information on that, I'd love to talk about it, because that thing is a monster. But the old 688s were the monsters of their time, and they're still pretty good today. Only built 62 boats. We still have 49 in service. Well, that's the 49 includes the Virginia class, so that's not fair. I think it's like 26 total is for the 688. Anyway, right here it says 22 of the Flight 3 are active, and 3 of the Flight 2 are still active. So what is that, 25 total? Submarines can deploy anywhere in the world as long as they're powered by that nuclear reactor. The nuclear reactor does 2 things for our submarines. It lets us get across the Atlantic and the Pacific into theaters that are far away from home, so we can fight wars, if necessary, away from the United States, protecting our infrastructure and our people. That's why nuclear power is so important to the United States. Geography plays a big role in that. We have to go a long way to get to the fight. So nuclear reactors allow us to move long-term, very fast, very far. And once we're there, we can stay as long as we have food, because we use the nuclear energy to desalinate water. And so we have the sweetest fresh water you'll ever drink now on today's submarines. It's good. If you get a tour on a submarine, ask for a glass of water. If it's in port, you're probably drinking pure water, but at sea, it's desalinated, which is really, really clean. But the only thing that limits them is the crew and the food. And then your mental ability to stay underwater for long periods of time, which is actually, they do a pretty good job of training the crews to deal with that. The people that can't handle submerged positions for literally months, and I'm talking 1.5 to 2 months. On the boomers, it's 3 months, or upwards towards 3 months. Sometimes it's not quite 3 months. Anyway, it's a long time. And so you need to have a certain mindset for that. And so the Navy's very good at finding those people and saying, hey, buddy, let's move you over to the surface fleet. And there's no disciplinary action. It's not his fault. It's just the way that he's wired. And so the Navy, the people that end up on these boats are kind of unique. We're a little strange. We have a weird sense of humor. And all those things are coping mechanisms to help us get through being locked inside these little tubes for extremely long periods of time. And then finally, let's go back to weapons. The Tomahawk TLAM Mark 48 Mod 7 torpedoes are the main weapons for these boats now. Yeah, I don't see any reason to be shooting the Mark 48 Mod 5 or 6 anymore when you have the Mod 7 AT Seabass that is not going to miss. If you shoot that thing close enough to get a detection, which is, it can look pretty far, it's going to hit. As long as it has enough fuel, it will get to where it's going. So, I can't say enough about this. It really brings back a lot of memories for me. This is nostalgia at this point for me. I have all these emotions as I'm talking about it, and all these stories that come back into my head of, oh yeah, you remember this. And if I tried to relay all those right now, it wouldn't make any sense. Just know that the 688s got us through the end of the Cold War and into the, whatever you want to call the post-Cold War period, very well. And they're serving well beyond their service life, in my opinion, as we bring on more and more Virginia class. And recently, the Virginia class production rate has gone down to almost 1 a year instead of 2 a year. It's just barely above 1 a year now. And so we're keeping these 688s on to do these missions that as we ramp up Virginia production again. So anyway, everybody, this is the 688. I'm going to wrap it up here. And thanks for supporting us on Patreon and YouTube members. And I'll look for your comments. Send me what you think. Thanks for listening. Bye.